I'd like to introduce our next session, Sean Connolly, who's VP of Field Engineering at HYPR, and Kurt Lieber, who's the former CISO at Wells Fargo. And they're going to present to us on enabling identity security by decoupling authentication from the identity provider, how FIDO lit the fuse. So over to you.
And at the very end, we're going to have a challenge. Whoever can say that 5 times fast gets a free FIDO token. So just come by, and we'll go through the competition. So I figure it's always best to start with these with introductions, as we just have, but I'll elaborate a little bit. I'm Sean Connolly. I lead pre- and post-sale engineering at HYPR. That's field engineering at the company. Prior to HYPR, I was with an identity access management company called SecureAuth. I was there for roughly 5 years. So have close to a decade in the space. I've been extremely excited to be part of FIDO over the past 4.5 years now with HYPR. And it's been just a growing and tremendous space and community to be part of. So Kurt, I'll let you say more about yourself, and then we can dive in.
Great. So yeah, Kurt Lieber. I have recently started a new role focused on advising startup companies as well as being an angel investor. Prior to that, most recently I was a CISO for Wells Fargo. Also was a CISO for Aetna for a little while. And I have implemented actually decoupled authentication solutions at my last 3 companies. So definitely a proponent and looking forward to talking to you guys about that today.
And I will also say special thanks to everyone remote joining, especially those in the Central and Eastern time zones. Thank you for sharing dinner with us as well. So this is the best dinner presentation you'll have all week. Just throwing that out there. So I'm going to start by setting the stage. Granted, we're all here. We're all at Authenticate. We're all drinking the Kool-Aid of FIDO. I rightfully am for the past 4.5 years. I'm still going to give us context. And the context is the same reason we've all been driven to join and be participants of FIDO. Now that context, bear with me, is also going to lead to the points that I and Kurt will continue to talk about. But as you see here on the screen, what has the reliance of passwords done for us? What have the reliance of shared secrets as a whole done for us as a society? The start is we've seen across the industry, whether it's government, supply chain, whatever the case might be, we are seeing that the reliance on passwords have failed us. And as I said at the beginning, I've been in this space for roughly a decade, and it's almost a joke at this point. It's almost a joke that every year the Verizon breach report comes out, we're talking about the problems with passwords. I'm still talking to companies about the problems with passwords. I'm thankfully now helping people eliminate those passwords, but it's a joke that we're still in this state 60 years later. We are seeing that throughout the society as well. You've got older generations that are being forced into interfacing with technology, and there's attack vectors going after them, phishing to get shared secrets. To top it off, my neighbor is a dear friend of ours. He's late 70s. He doesn't even have a computer, but he has a social security number. He has other shared secrets. People are calling him on a daily basis. He's telling me about this every week. We go out and do our lawns together, spend time together. But he's telling me about it every single week that he is getting bombarded with people trying to steal his shared secrets. He doesn't even have a computer, and people are going after him for his shared secrets. Our children are seeing this. I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and one of the perks of them being forced to go through remote learning over the past year was they now have an appreciation for what I do. They're typing in a password, a very, very simple password, and I think everyone in the same class has the same password to get into their systems. But they're like, Dad, I finally get it. I finally get it. I'm like, it's dear to my heart. I appreciate that. But it's true. Our children are being forced into now the adoption of passwords and shared secrets through their education systems. And not only are they being forced into it, they're being forced into it with poor practices of, you and all of your friends are going to share a password, and you're going to make sure that you all know the password. It's not okay. It's not okay. My kids are telling me, like, it's kind of weird how simple these passwords are. Last but not least, this is something that affects everyone here. This is something that affects everyone here. I've helped build a team at HYPR, and this has affected myself. We've got a shortage in this industry, and we've got a tremendous feat ahead of us. We need to eliminate shared secrets passwords and help continue to push FIDO forward. We need to also just build a culture of people to join this community. Now, why now? What have we done to address this password problem over the past 60 years, as the thing said? Even the 10 years I've been here, we've seen that over time, as we've acknowledged that this is a problem, we have started to layer things on top of the password itself. So you take a TOTT, this is the other thing you'll have to say 5 times fast at the end of the day. I'm just throwing that out there. TOTP token, I said it there. We're layering these things on top of a password. We inherently knew that this was fundamentally wrong, and as an industry, we started layering on top of that. The problem with this is we've taken an inherent shared secret that can be compromised at scale, and we've started layering shared secrets on top of a shared secret, and I've just said secret, I think, 6 times, and it's really bothering me that I keep saying secret. So you get to this state, you also have to say that 5 times fast. You get to this state where we have been approaching this all the wrong way. Something else that I'll throw out there, and I'll probably never forget this, but I remember 8 years ago, the company I was with was selling a product that did both single sign-on and MFA in the same platform, like the same product, the same license. And at the time, that was monumental. People were shocked. I'd call them and say, yeah, this one product does both things in one platform. And people were mind blown. It was back when we were buying RSA tokens, and you had to layer that onto other things and connect all of them. The point there being is not only have we continued to add friction, but that was the start of this consolidation effect. We started siloing authentication and siloing identity. So we then had single platforms going out that were inherently adding on top of the password and creating these silos of authentication and identity. Simultaneously, we globally have started recognizing that this is a problem. Privacy is a big aspect of it. Privacy is something I've heard many people here talk about, thankfully. And this has led to just momentum. And this has led to tailwind of us continually perpetuating this problem. So what do we as an industry do? What do we typically do when we're encountered with these global monumental problems like this? I'll start with browsers. This has nothing to do with passwords, but I'll start with browsers. Back in the day when you used to go to a website, you'd have a terrible experience because you'd realize you hit a website, and this is after you dialed up to get access to that website. You'd see, oh, wait, no, I need to get this other browser for the best experience on this site. And it was just confusing. It was confusing. So we created W3C. We came together as a community, and we drove forward standards to ensure that everyone could have the best and proper experiences browsing the internet. The internet exploded, and this is, again, goes back to my experience as well. I was happy to be part of a team driving forward OpenID Connect and SAML, driving forward a standard that made it simpler to navigate the internet. I've spent a long time rambling and preaching Kool-Aid that I know, again, we're all drinking. I love drinking it, though. Talking about passwords. Passwords are a problem. So we've all come together, and FIDO is helping us address the password problem that I've talked about. So passionate about it. I hope people can see it. But this also doesn't address the fact that we've inherently been siloing our authentication as well. So that said, what hackers do when they go and look at going after you guys, at all of us, they look and say, okay, what are the most simple ways that I can go and approach and attack this company, this organization? Passwords are easy, they're phishable, they're guessable. There's tools that are pre-built. I think our CEO, he's got a high school nephew that quite literally can just scale an attack against people, just scraping passwords and replaying them against people. It's simple, it's easy to do these things. But not only are they having to do it, or not only are they doing it against us, they're doing it against a single target, a single siloed target. What we need to do is start to separate out these silos that we've built and ensure that we can take in true passwordless MFA with FIDO and scale that out through an organization. So Kurt's going to speak to how he's done this, and examples that he's seen from his peers. But I've seen numerous people that I've worked with directly that have 4 identity providers. They're all completely disjointed. They're all siloed. They all have their own MFA associated to them. We need to have the ability to layer FIDO authentication, true passwordless MFA, across all of them. So by decoupling authentication, and we'll talk about why decouple, by decoupling that authentication, you can help ensure that one seamless FIDO-based security posture can be associated to all of them. So that was a very long-winded way of introducing my friend here.
Thank you. Right, so as Sean mentioned, I have done this 3 times now. I am a proponent, and I guess the first question that I get asked a lot when I talk about this with others, why decouple? I have an IDP, we're an Okta shop, so we use Okta Verify, or we're an Azure shop, so we use Microsoft Authenticator. Well, the first reason that I tell people, if you've done M&As, if you're a larger organization or an older organization, you may have an environment that looks like this, where you've got some of the things that run on Okta, some of the things that run on Azure AD. I can tell you from a Wells Fargo standpoint, we have 4 out of the 6, we had 4 out of the 6 items on there. And it just creates an environment where you've got multiple tools to support, you have to pay maintenance on all of them, you have to support all of them, sort of a giant pain in the keister. Second reason is none of these, or not all of these, are built around common standards. So yes, they may work really well when you integrate them with that particular environment, but can you introduce a new method of authentication if you want to do facial recognition because you're in a healthcare setting and that works well for healthcare sometimes? How easy is that to integrate? Not all of these are built around, as I said, open standards, not all fully FIDO compliant, and so that makes it much more difficult. And then the third, and in my opinion, by far the most important reason, is simply user confusion. And we had this at Wells Fargo in spades. We had about 1,000 applications that were using Okta, but that's out of a denominator of about 5,000. And so then we had another few hundred that were on Azure AD. We had some that were using RSA. We had some that were using others. And our users, it was very difficult for them to figure out, what am I supposed to use? So by decoupling and aligning on a single method of authentication, you allow your users to have a much more consistent, understandable, easy user experience. And that's really what the call to action is for here, is that the businesses are demanding that, and you are starting to see that in the marketplace. So Sean alluded to this. I've told you about Wells Fargo. There are a lot of large companies that are taking this step, including some of the other large banks out there. They've got Ping, they've got Okta, they've got SiteMinder, they've got all of these common IDPs, and they are working, rather than replacing all of the IDPs, which is very expensive and cumbersome, simply decoupling the authentication and putting that into a single environment allows them, from a user standpoint, to make it feel like one thing instead of having all these different experiences. And by bundling it on FIDO, or building it around FIDO, I should say, you're ensuring that you've got future-proof, essentially, because it's built on open standards.
Kurt, I'll double down on that. To be able to take what we're collectively working on here and drive it forward, it's not feasible to think I need to take decades of identity structures down. Thousands of applications you had just referenced. Another company that I had worked with, thankfully it's not one person with 6,000 applications, but another organization had 6,000 applications spread across multiple identity providers like you see these companies do. It's not feasible to think that you're going to be able to drive forward passwordless MFA if you need to reconfigure every one of the 6,000 applications. So looking at what this industry and what FIDO is enabling us to do as an industry, decoupling allows us to drive this forward with the investments we've made over the past few decades at scale and unify user experiences and secure those user experiences in an enterprise.
Okay, so we've talked about this. So then the last thing I would mention here in terms of the implementation part of this, it's very important as you're looking towards decoupling to make sure that you pick a solution that is able to do FIDO end-to-end. And I'll talk more about this when we talk about how to sell this, but you don't want to just do servers. You don't want to just do Windows. You want to be able to do your entire environment. And if you support Macs in your environment, you need a solution that enables FIDO for Macs. And that is something that's super important. And I can tell you from my own standpoint, not all of the vendor solutions out there will support this end-to-end. So make sure that this is a question you're asking as you go down this path. The next question I usually get asked is, okay, well, I like the idea of decoupling, it makes sense, but now how do I convince, either my stakeholders or my board of directors, depending on how your decision tree is within your company. How do I convince them to go down this path? So here's some thoughts around that. First and foremost, what do your stakeholders expect of you when you're implementing this solution? For the most part, your stakeholders are not going to care about this. I can tell you in all of the board discussions I've ever had in my entire career, the question on whether or not we should decouple authentication from the identity provider has really never come up in those conversations. This is not something that they think about, but it's something that they care deeply about. So I have never really approached this as I've been socializing this with stakeholders from a, hey, we really need to decouple and here's why. It's more about we need to eliminate passwords. We need to make this easier for our users. We need to make this easier for our customers. And here's a way that we can do this. And yeah, there's some security benefits, but really this is from an ease of use standpoint. So your stakeholders are going to look to you to make the recommendation. That means that you shouldn't wait for them to come to ask you how that you can make this better. You should be going to them to saying, hey, I've got an idea, and here's how we can make this better. I will tell you, this is, out of all the things that I've ever had to sell from a security standpoint, this is one of the easiest, because you go to people, actually at Wells Fargo, it was a sort of a two-step approach. One year, we changed our password requirements from 8 to 16 characters. And then the next year, I went in and said, hey, by the way, we can get rid of all of these passwords altogether. And that was like the easiest sell I've ever made. So as you go down this path, make sure that you are also managing their expectations. If you're a large environment, if you have a lot of legacy, there will be potentially areas that are so old that they're not going to be able to support FIDO of any kind. Mainframe was the Achilles heel that we had at Wells Fargo. There may be others as well. People are going to get very excited about this, at least in my experience, they get very excited about it. So you do want to make sure you're managing their expectations to say, yes, this is going to solve 95% of our problem, but here's some caveats to be aware of. And then as you head down this path, the other thing that I found that was critically important is to make sure that you build consensus around this. It is a big change. It's a positive change. A lot of people like the change, but it's still change, and so you're going to want to make sure you bring your stakeholders along. One of the techniques that I have used for that is called 6 levels of consensus. You may have also heard of this as fists of 5. This is where you, especially if you work in maybe a more political environment, yes doesn't always mean yes. Yes sometimes means no, and so you go to somebody and say, hey, do you support this? Oh, yes, absolutely. And then you find out later that maybe they weren't quite as supportive as they thought. By driving through the 6 levels of consensus or the fists of 5, it really helps to nail people down and make them commit, say, yeah, I'm fully supported, unqualified, no hesitation, put me down as a number 1. Or you can read the rest of these, and it's just different gradations of how close to yes does yes really mean. This will help you get a better understanding before you go forward and ask for whatever budget you're going to need to ask for to implement this. And then depending on your organization, for some smaller companies, this may be a board level decision. For larger organizations, it may be a CIO level decision, but at some point you're going to need to likely take it to your decisioning group, whatever that is. And one, again, technique that I've used successfully in the past is to go to, and if it's a board decision, this would be called a designated board geek. But most decision-making groups have it, where it's that person that's a little bit more technical, even if it's a non-technical decision-making group, and they are often the translator, where they're charged with taking the IT idea and translating into board speak or whatever it may be. So find out who that person is if you don't know them already. Meet with them in advance. Pre-socialization is critical here. This is a fairly arcane topic if they want to get into the weeds of what you're actually doing. And so by bringing your non-technical stakeholders along in a one-on-one setting, you will oftentimes, it's more comfortable for them to ask questions, seek to understand things that they may not otherwise understand in a one-on-one setting rather than in a larger group setting where they may not want to appear as though they don't fully understand all of this. So by bringing them along, you will make your life a little bit easier. And then, they will then take the responsibility, if it is a board level decision, they will take the responsibility of typically pre-socializing this with the rest of the board members. Those board members have an established level of trust with that person, So that person comes in saying, yeah, this is a good thing, we should support this, then that tends to make your life a little bit easier. So those are some of the things that I've done from an implementation standpoint, both to how to select a product and then how to make sure that you get it sold within an organization. I think all of this really sets us up nicely for what does the future hold for us. This is a tipping point or an inflection point for authentication as a product. And where, to Sean's point earlier, we've been talking about passwords being a problem for 20 years now. Now, actually, we can get to a point where we can do something about it. And so as we look towards the future, I'm going to hand it back to Sean, and he's going to tell you about what that might look like.
I mean, we're here together, whether virtually, whether physically, we're here together. We're on the same mission. As I said earlier, I set the stage with the same reason that we all came to this conference, to push this forward. So the problem is understandable to all of us here. With everything that Kurt helped us understand of how do we then present this to the business and expand this, we're the ones that are going to be creating the future. We're the ones pushing this forward and driving change. And that change itself, we want to see a bright change. We want to see a future where we're not sitting here thinking about one single password that can be compromising an entire supply chain, an entire government agency, whatever can be taken down by shared secrets are the targets at the moment. And it's us that are going to help eliminate that possibility. I don't want to have to go and mow the lawn with my neighbor and talk about how he's continually being targeted for people trying to steal shared secrets from him. We'll eliminate this and ensure that generations no longer need to deal with the problem of shared secrets. Our children themselves, they should not have to create shared passwords. My son, who's 8, has a class, and they all have the same password. I'm looking forward to us eliminating that and changing that, making sure that that's no longer a requirement to get educated. Let's get rid of these shared secrets. So together, we're the ones that will help enable this industry, enable businesses to understand this problem and help drive forward this adoption in the industry. So I will say that is the content we have. I believe we might have room for some questions, so I'll open them up if there's a remote or questions here.
We don't have any remote questions. Does
We blew
anyone
them
in
away.
the room? It's very concise. Does anyone in the room have any questions? No? All right, well, thank you very much. It was a really interesting presentation.
Thank you.